Hey, what's going on, people? Welcome to another episode 4 of the Wheel Culture Podcast, your group chat on everything car related, sometimes bicycles, and a little bit of that random stuff to keep it interesting. So think about it being a Pareto distribution of sorts. So 70% cars, 20% bicycles, and 10% random stuff. Hey, just because. What are we going to be talking about this episode? Episode 4. It's a bit of a random one, to be honest, but let's get into it anyway. So the first thing I want to speak about with you all is driving shoes. Is there an ultimate driving shoe? Now, I say this because, as I mentioned in a previous episode, my wife not long ago passed her test, and one of the things that got me thinking about was when I was learning to drive. And for me personally, I noticed that the shoes, or the trainers that I wore rather, made a big difference to how I drove. As time went on and I got more experience, it didn't matter so much. I could drive barefoot, which is kind of gross because I don't really do that and it's a bit weird. But I could drive in Crocs, I could drive in Timbs, I could drive in work boots, I could drive in Dr. Martens, whatever. It doesn't really matter too much now. But I did notice that when I was driving that I became very sensitive to the shoes that I wore, and my ability to control the clutch and control the car kind of varied. And I think in some ways, this is always going to depend on the car that you're driving and how sensitive the controls are of the car that you're driving. But for me, I found that, especially early on, trainers did make a big difference, or footwear made a big difference. And so I'm wondering what are the best driving shoes or trainers? Now, the short answer for this for me is probably the Puma Speedcat Replicat mids. They're Replicats? I think they're Replicats. But when I first started driving, as I said, being into cars a little bit more than most, I might have taken it a little bit far. And as like some of my friends like to remind me about, when I first started driving, I had a Rover 214 SI, by the way, just to set the scene. So it's a 3-door Rover, 1.4 litre engine, 16 valve. Maybe it have 105 bhp, I think. Anyway, point being, it wasn't really a fast car. But me being a driver, I thought, you know what I'll do? I'm going to get myself some driving gloves. And so it's funny thinking about it now, but I still would get them. So if you do know some good driving gloves, then let me know. But I've just passed my test, so imagine this. 18, I think. And so I go down to Oxford Street and I go searching through the shops to try and find leather gloves. And I go to, I think, House of Fraser. I think I went to Selfridges. I went to Debenhams. And I think it might have been Debenhams in the end, funny enough, that I ended up in that had the gloves that I wanted. And I wish I could remember the brand, but I can't. But they were really nice gloves. And to this day, I'm still sad about the fact that I lost one of them. And so for a while, I was driving with one glove. I was driving with one glove like Michael Jackson, which is random. And I never bought another pair just because people used to rip me for them. But I actually really enjoyed driving with them. But anyway, these gloves were, just to set the scene, they're sort of stitched brown and tan leather. Yes, brown and tan. So it was like a darker brown and a lighter brown together. Open back driving gloves with a button on. And I was trying to find gloves that fit my hand perfectly so that when I buttoned them up at the back, it wasn't loose, like it was tight on my hands. Kind of like, I forget that film that's got Ryan Gosling in it. If I remember it, I'll put that into the video. But yeah, if I do remember it, I'll put it into the video. But there's that film with Ryan Gosling where he drives and he's got... Does Baby Driver have driving gloves? I'm not sure. Anyway, but I had these brown open back leather driving gloves and I thought they were the best thing ever. And every time I wore them, people would hit them. I didn't really care at the time, but I think maybe it did subconsciously get to me because I stopped wearing them after a while. But yeah, I do think driving gloves actually do make driving a nice experience. The leather and leather grips really well on the steering wheel, and I felt like I had extra control. Gloves aside, what I also wore were the Puma Speedcats, and these were the mids because I had the low ones as well, but I used to love the mids because they were kind of like a boot, but it wasn't too much of a boot. Because if you had like the full-on sort of Sparko Puma kind of kart/racing boots, it's just like, well, where are you going? They didn't really go with anything. But I remember having these blue suede, I think they were suede. Yeah, I'm going to call them blue suede Puma Speedcat mid. I think they were kart boots and they had quite a smooth, hard rubber sole. But what they also had that was beautiful was they kind of had like a bit of a curve or chamfer on the, not really a chamfer, it was like a nice sort of gradual curve on the heel of the shoe. And that made changing gears really nice. And I don't know how to sort of heel toe shift from quite a young age. Well, I say I learned. I've taught myself. I don't know if I'm doing it the right way, but it feels good when I do it. When you kind of downshift and you rev match. So as you're to people that know how to race, they know what I'm talking about. To people that maybe they're less familiar with this, rev matching is the idea basically that when you go to change gears, particularly on a downshift, the revs of the engine rise because of the gear ratio is different. Science, I'll get into it. But point being that when you downshift, if you press the clutch in and quickly blip the accelerator, so just press the accelerator a little bit so the revs rise, and then you release the clutch and shift down, or you shift down into your gear, next gear, and then release the clutch. If you can do it just right, then it's something called rev matching, where you increase the revs of the engine to match the speed of the gearbox and the wheels. And if you get it right, it feels amazing. It's like it makes for incredibly smooth gear changes, and it makes you just feel like you're an amazing driver, basically. And so having the right driving shoes really helped me with that. But what I also really enjoy driving were Converse. So I think if you can't, those Puma Speed Cats, if I could find them, I would get another pair. I think I've had 2 or 3 of them. One of them I kind of, I think forgot about for a little while and got moldy, so I had to throw them away. But I look on eBay every so often, long for another pair of those. I wouldn't really like to get them in green, never found them in green, but found them in black and blue. And I love those trainers, man. They were amazing for driving. Bit weird to kind of make them work with an outfit when you're going out, but yeah, man, they were great. They were great shoes. That said, Puma Speed Cats up there at the top, or the Replicats. I'll get the name exactly right in the description or down below. Converse, just those Converse All Stars sort of Chuck Taylors. Those are really great for driving. Really thin sole, and I think they gave you a lot of driving feel. Well, but sometimes I find that with Converse, was it Converse? I think it was the Converse. It made my feet a little bit sweaty when I was driving. My toes felt weird. Probably gonna edit that out actually. But yeah. Anyway, that aside, I also really enjoyed driving in Vans slip-ons. So like Vans Eras and Vans slip-ons. I think what I'm generally seeing here is that the thinner the sole is, the better the shoes. Some people, for driving that is, some people drive in, is it Tod's? I've never really, I've never really had a pair of Tod's. I did want to get a pair, but I never really liked how they seem to wear over time. Like the shoe just seemed to kind of deform a little bit, and that didn't really appeal to me. But yeah, man, I do maintain that if you are into driving and you can find yourself a pair of Puma Speed Cats, especially the mids, just because that strap, I don't know where it is, just does something. It just makes it extra special. Then do that. Yeah, I think those are the best driving shoes. So next thing is sharing a car. So again, having had my wife not long ago pass her driving test, very proud of her. I'm very happy that she has done it. One of the things that I've never really considered having to do is share a car. I think I might have mentioned this a little bit in the previous episode, but I'm going to talk about it again because I can and because it's my podcast. But yeah, so it's really interesting that I'd never really considered what it would be like to share a car. So historically, kind of in our relationship at least, I've always driven, and so if I needed the car, it was always a given that it was there, and so I was never really worried about not having to use that. But it's interesting that now having to have this state where there's one car in the household at the moment, and so we both have to share it, and it's working out okay. Well, so I get questions like, "Oh, so what are you doing today? You working from home? You going into the office?" So I'm going to the office. "Oh, what time are you getting back?" And it's like, "Okay, around this time." "Oh, you sure? You sure? Do you want me to drop you off?" Or and it's just interesting, like the conversations that we have now. So, yeah, sharing a car. Don't think I like that topic. I might cut that out. Moving on, there is what makes you a car enthusiast? I think this is an interesting question. I think it's one that I could probably talk about every week, but a couple of thoughts came into my mind about this. So I was looking online at different articles as I do and little car related things, and I came across this article which I'll post a link to, which is what makes you a car enthusiast. And so the first thing was that I find, and it's really true for me, was recognizing people based on what car they drive. And so I sometimes can be quite bad with names. I'm really good with faces, so I almost always remember seeing people, but whatever their name is escapes me. But a car, I always remember the cars that people drive, even down to like the registration plates to an extent. I kind of remember Not exactly the plate, because that's kind of sounds stalkerish, but it's more, you remember like, okay, it was a 64, or it started with KP, or it had like a certain sequence at the end, like a, I don't know, LLD or something like that. And so I'm definitely someone that applies to. And so if you tell me, oh, remember so-and-so from where? And I'll be like, oh, I'm not too sure. What car do you drive? Oh, I had an M3. Oh, the one with the Saxo, or the one with the Golf, or the one with the 5 Series. Was it blue? Okay, yeah, I remember him. But yeah, if you tell me, oh, do you remember this person by their name? I might not have a clue who you're talking about. Number 2 on the list was every exhaust sound turns your head. And I think this is definitely me. If I hear a car going past on the road, if I hear a car, if I'm in the office and I hear an exhaust, I'm looking at the window trying to see where it is and trying to kind of imagine what the engine might be. I'm not one of those people that can identify a car just purely by the sound of its exhaust. I mean, I wish I was. I think that's amazing, people that can do that. If you know anyone that is like that, and please do tag them in this podcast, and maybe we can have a chat, because I don't know what it is that enables someone to, like, I can kind of roughly hear what I think is like maybe a 4-cylinder turbo. The V12 is kind of distinctive. V8's kind of got that growl, so you know they're quite bassy, so it's kind of apparent. Like with some engines, it's kind of apparent when an engine has more cylinders. It kind of has that more sort of towards the F1S kind of higher pitch sound. But for the most part, I can't tell you what a car is by its exhaust. But I can tell you that when I do hear a car go by, and I do hear its exhaust, I get excited for one, and I always try to see what it is. So yeah, that makes sense to me. Another thing is taking photos, and so I take photos a lot anyway. If you go onto my Instagram, it's called the Will Culture Podcast Instagram account. I took pictures as part of a sort of business I had in the past, which I've kind of wound up now, but it's a different story, maybe for another time. But I just take a lot of photos of cars. I'd go to meets, I'd go to places. I would just walk around and like effectively car spot. Not quite in the same way that sort of those people that jump in front of cars do, but I would like go around central London, particularly in summer, and kind of like car spot and take pictures of cars. And I just enjoy photographing cars. So if you go onto my Instagram, there's quite a few pictures on there. And what I'm thinking that I might do is I'm not sure how exactly this is going to work, but I think what might be cool, let me know if you agree with this or if you're interested in, is sharing car wallpaper. So photographs that I've taken, I'll get them, export them at like a nice resolution that you can kind of have on your desktop at 4K or whatever it is. And yeah, I think some of the photos that I've taken, I will give them to you all, to the car community, as a goodwill gesture, as a gift, as a thank you for taking the time to share this time with me and to subscribe to the podcast or to comment. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work at the moment, but I think that could be cool. So I will be linking or providing some sort of access to, I don't know, maybe what do you think about maybe with each podcast I'll release a photograph or a wallpaper or something like that. Yeah, I'll give it some thought. I'll work out the details for it, but I think it would be cool if not every episode, at very least this episode, to share one of the photos that I've taken as a free wallpaper that you can download. So maybe it'll be an M4, or I've got some classic stuff. I've got an Aventador and a few Aston Martins. Yeah, I'll see what I can rustle up. But I think that might be quite cool. Let me know if you like the idea of that, and yeah, I can be a wallpaper plug for you. Working on cars was the next on the list. I think that definitely applies to me. I'm someone that's worked on cars. Interestingly enough, one of the things that first really kind of inspired me to work on cars was getting the brakes on my Rover changed. And I remember at the time being really excited about this. And yeah, it was a Rover, but I really liked this car. And so what I did was I remember doing lots of research about brake pads, performance brake pads. I know my car was only a 1.4, but in my mind it was still race car. So I wanted trying to build a race car here. And I remember doing lots of research at the different types of pads, at Frodo DS 2000s or 2500s, and should I get these ones, those ones. And what I came across was a company called EBC. And so EBC do different grades of pads. I think they've got EBC green stuff, red stuff, and yellow stuff. And so I think the idea is that it's kind of like a traffic light system. So I think I haven't bought them in a while, because I haven't really had a performance car in a while. I've just been buying sort of like regular OEM type pads, like the Pagids and things like that, and Brembos. But I remember it was, I think it was the green stuff, because I think the green stuff is kind of like fast road-ish, and then I think maybe yellow is like the sort of sporty kind of faster road, and then red was I need to check exactly what it was, but the red stuff was like the hardcore kind of race compound. And I'm gonna try and find out now. EBC brakes, let's have a look on their website rather than me just making stuff up. I've got a laptop in front of me. I'll go on their site and I'll just be certain about what I'm saying. But the point was, I did some research and EBC were recommended, and so I thought, oh, this is cool, I'll get some EBC pads. And I remember taking some time to get the pads. They're looking for discs. I got dimpled discs, and then I was really happy about that. And I'd spent, because they're performance rated, I spent a bit more on them than the standard stuff. And then I didn't actually consider how much it would cost to get this stuff fitted. And so this time, new driver, haven't really worked on a car before, and I remember paying for it at the time, and I was just shocked at how much brakes cost to fit. And I was thinking, there must be a better way. And at this time, I was driving around, let's say, I wouldn't say like my hair was on fire, but I was generous in my usage of the accelerator, shall we say. And so yeah, I went through brake pads quite quickly, and I went through quite a lot of them at a point in time. And so yeah, it was the green stuff. So I'm looking at the website. Yeah, green stuff are superb street upgrade pads. So green stuff are supposed to be a step up from kind of normal pads. And the thing is, it was really good. They really had like a stronger bite. But I think did they produce more brake dust or less brake dust? A medium to low dust material. Yeah, so what was cool about them as well is they produced a bit less dust than sort of standard pads did, because don't know if you know this or not, depending on the pad that you buy, some pads produce a heck of a lot of dust. Generally, I think some high performance pads tend to be more dusty because that's how they create better performance. But yeah, these were like kind of performance pads that were less dusty. But that wasn't why I bought them. I didn't buy them because of the dust they produced. Bought them because I thought they looked sick and they were gonna make me be able to brake faster like an F1 driver. And they kind of did that, to be fair. Reduced the brake fade effect a bit. And what was the point of me talking about these brake pads? Yeah, so I was talking about working on cars. And so yeah, I took all these performance bits that I'd got. I got my brake pads, got my discs, because my Rover had drums at the back, so wasn't really getting performance drums. But I spent what at the time was a fair bit of money, I think, to me. So maybe it was like a couple of £100 between the discs and the pads. And then I was shocked that I think the labour cost more than the price of the bits that I'd bought. And so I was quite annoyed about that. And then I kind of thought, well, how hard can it... It's weird, because I think at that point I thought, well, how hard can it be to do brakes? Not that it isn't, doesn't take any skill, but I thought, well, if it's something that people do on a regular basis, it's like a service item, then to an extent, it's got to be somewhat easy to do, right? Like it can't be made that difficult if people change things on their car on a regular basis. Things like spark plugs, things like oil, things like brake pads, brake discs to a lesser extent, but they're still kind of serviceable items. So I think it might have been that kind of gave me the idea that maybe I can do this myself. And I remember for a long time I was really worried about it. Did a lot of research. I remember looking at loads and loads of forums and loads of videos. I remember buying like a Haynes manual for the Rover and kind of like going through the process to the point where I knew the process like in my mind. And then I kind of gradually started to invest in the tools and stuff to help me do it. Bought like a Halfords toolkit. Halfords in the UK are like a automotive or motor faction type store. They kind of do a mix of stuff actually. You can buy bikes at Halfords, car stereos, batteries, some minor kind of car parts, paint for cars and stuff like that. They sell a lot of tools as well. But their auto tools are quite good. The ones with they've got a lifetime guarantee with them as well. And so I've had that toolkit for many years now, and I've really enjoyed that. The box was trash that it came in, that kind of broke not too soon after getting it, having it open, a kind of hinge bit. I think they revised it since, but I haven't got a new box. But the tools themselves were really good. And so kind of got the tools together, and then I remember one day just kind of setting some time aside to do it. The first time you do brakes, it can be a bit scary because it's like, well, will I be okay? Basically, brakes are one of the only thing that really stops the car. And if I get this wrong, then I'm putting myself at risk and possibly other people. So that was kind of what put me off initially. But what I did find is that it isn't that scary. Once you got the right tools and, you take your time and you're methodical about it, you make sure you kind of jack the car up sensibly, check jacking points on your car, be sure that, you're not, that the point that you're jacking the car from is actually a jacking point, because it's one of the worst things. Even I've kind of come close to doing it. Pick a point underneath the car. It looks like it's got a rubber pad, but maybe that point underneath the car is designed for a 4-post lift and not for a single jack. And you can very easily punch a hole through your floor. Not done that yet, thank God, but I have possibly come close in places where I've kind of tried that and it, hasn't worked. Side note on that, if you lower your car, jacking it up can be a pain, so you might want to get a low profile jack. But anyway, that is me going off on a tangent to say, if you are a car enthusiast, if you work on your car or you work on cars, providing advice. I think I mentioned this before. It's definitely something that I find myself doing quite often in relation to cars. If most people that know me, that are in my sort of social circle, if they have a question about cars, sometimes people that I don't even know that well, and I do kind of, as much as I spoke about it before, I do actually quite like it when people ask me about cars, because if you're a car person, you can talk about cars at length for time, and so I get really excited, sometimes to the point of giving too much detail. So I have to kind of like rein it in and remind myself that if someone's asked me about buying a car, they don't need a essay or sort of like a war and peace or a long story about the car industry and the market and where I think car technology is going in the next 10 years. They just want to know, maybe for this amount of money, what car do you think might be good. Speaking of that, one of my friends who commented on I think it was an Instagram post I might have put out. No, I think it was I actually did a post on TikTok. So I have a TikTok account as well, which I'm not doing a great job of promoting all this stuff, but I'm getting there. I'm working on it. I'm trying to bring all these platforms together. But it was funny because it reminded me of a incident that happened. So I'm going to avoid saying her name to protect the innocent, but she'll know exactly who she is. So I remember she's gone out with my wife, and I think she dropped her home. Obviously, it's before my wife was driving herself, but she had dropped her home, and then she said to me that she had a problem with her car. The lights, is it the lights weren't going on, or there was a light appearing on her dash, and she didn't know where it was. I'm not going to do this story justice, but it was funny. It's funny in retrospect. At the time, I was just like, these things happen, and I was understanding. But it is kind of funny thinking about it, that it is possible to, because cars do have quite different controls sometimes. But I think she was trying to work out how to put on her headlights, and she didn't know, or it was actually how to turn off her main beams, and she didn't know. I wish I could remember which one it was. Yeah, but it was really funny to me. So that was an example of advice that I gave somebody and helped her with helped her to work out what lights she was using on her car and what the different ones were. Which is weird because she'd been driving the car for a while, so I'm not really sure what happened. It's just maybe one of those moments. Maybe it was a long day. But yeah, it was really funny, and she reminded me about it. So I'm not going to say her name, but she knows who she is, and she remembers that moment. But yeah, that was pretty funny. Another example of some of the advice that I've provided. I remember, another story. So I have, there's a friend that I used to work with back when I was young. I worked in local authority. It's not really relevant, to be honest, but a friend that I worked with, he wanted to buy a car. I think he passed his test a while ago, but he decided that he wanted to get a car. So he'd been looking at cars, and I was like, well, do you know what you want? Do you have something in mind already, or would you like me to help you find it? He goes, no, I've seen the car already. I know which car I want to get. This is my price range. This is the car. Have a look at it. I think he showed me the advert. Wasn't really impressed with it, but I said, okay, well, I'll come along with you to come and look at it. It was a Burgundy A-Class. And so this is like the first A-Class models, the ones that had more of the wedge shape, not the newer ones that look more like sort of normal hatchbacks. This was sort of the first A-Class, the one that in tests flipped over because it had a high center of gravity, that one. So I remember going to see this car, I'm thinking, having a look at it, and to say this car was a shed would be complimentary. Like, you know, when you look at a car, this is one of the things that so people that know about cars already, I'm probably preaching to the converted, but if you don't know a lot about cars, one of the things that can really help you is looking at the condition of the car. So you might not necessarily know all of the detail, but, you know, pay attention, use your eyes, have a walk around the car and try and get a sense of how this car's been looked after, what it's been like, how it's been owned, how the owner has cared for it, not just from a service history perspective, because sometimes people can do unscrupulous things with that, but in terms of like the overall condition of like the paintwork. So walk around the car, do you see dents and things like that? Sometimes those things can happen, and that isn't necessarily a reason not to buy a car, but pay attention to the paintwork. Are there a lot of scratches? Is it excessive? How clean is the car? Does it look like it's being cleaned on a regular basis? Or do you have like things like caked on brake dust on the wheels, where you kind of see like they've made a bit of an effort to clean it for the sake of the sale, but you can see that the brake dust is kind of like caked onto the wheels and it's not really, hasn't really been cleaned maybe on the inside. You know, looking at like the headlights, the gaps between the panels, do things line up? Does it look like the car's been knocked a lot? Is there a lot of damage or excessive damage on the bumpers? Are things out of alignment? Are things loose? Are there panels that don't really match? You know, looking at the panels closely, does the paint finish look weird? Is it like maybe kind of orange peel-esque? Is it some bits of it really shiny? Are some bits of it almost matte looking? This is one of the things that I do a lot when I'm driving for some reason, is I look out for cars that have had a respray. And, you know, that's not to say that it's a bad thing. Sometimes cars get resprayed for a variety of reasons, but you can kind of always see a respray that was, I don't know if you call it a bad respray or if it's just badly prepared, like the person didn't do the work to kind of make sure the surface was right before they started spraying. And I don't say this as someone who's an expert in spraying, I'm not, very much an amateur, but yeah, you can kind of just see when someone's put effort into it, because it's not really noticeable, even if sometimes the paint doesn't really match. But also you can kind of tell when someone hasn't put effort into it, and it's just like the finish doesn't look right. The car suddenly looks matte, or it just doesn't it doesn't look quite right. Things don't look straight, things look crooked. You know, looking inside the engine bay, does it look like it's are there I'll get onto the engine bay in a moment actually. Looking inside the car, what do the seats look like? Are they worn? Has it been cleaned? Is it obvious that, you know, they haven't really cleaned it for a while? Looking at the steering wheel and the gear stick and the things that people touch on a regular basis, compare that to the mileage of the vehicle. If the vehicle has really high mileage, then you know, expect that there's going to be a lot of wear on the inside because it's been driven a lot. If a vehicle has really low mileage, but, you know, the steering wheel is smooth as eggs, or just like the steering wheel is just like glossy, gear stick is glossy, all the switch gear looks worn but the mileage is low, then it's probably quite likely it's been clocked and that the mileage has been illegally adjusted to make the car seem younger than it actually is. You know, some of that, and so there's things that people can do around that, but I won't get into the details of how that kind of works and things. But yeah, it's just looking at cars on condition, understanding how has this thing been cared for? Has this person cared for the vehicle? Are there a lot of switches that are broken? Are there a lot of switches that are worn away? Is the condition in alignment with the mileage? Sometimes you can have cars that have higher mileage but have been really cared for and they look almost like or closer to new on the inside. Sometimes you might have cars that have low mileage and they haven't really been cared for, and it might not be that the car's been clocked, but it's just that the person has been quite rough with it. You know, looking underneath the engine bay, is everything kind of like in shape? You don't necessarily need to know what you're looking for, but do things look like they're loose? Looking at the battery, for example, is there lots of corrosion around the terminals? Does it look like, you know, the sort of like bubbling and kind of like dust and things like that, kind of like around the battery terminals? Are the battery terminals loose? Is the battery itself loose? Is there sort of random duct tape in the engine? That's what I saw in this car with my friend. I remember opening the engine. I remember looking at the car and just thinking, this car's a no. The head unit didn't work. That's another thing. Does everything work? Do all the switches work? Press all the buttons. Do the windows go up and down? Are there squeaks? You know, sometimes it isn't necessarily a deal breaker, but recognizing all these things and being clear on what they are puts you in the best position possible to either walk away or negotiate if it is still something that you're interested in. So with this car, I went around it, radio wasn't working, wasn't clear why. I was like, that's a bit suspect. And the condition was a bit ratty. Engine started, I think they'd warmed up the car already, but it still sounded rough when they started it. That's another thing that you should try and do, if possible, when you go to see a car that you're buying. Ask the owner not to start the engine so you can hear it start from cold, because sometimes cars have cold starting problems, and once the engine's warm you don't really notice that, you know. So ask them not to warm up the car before you get there. In the engine there was like duct tape around like some of the air ducting, so the like the airbox area and stuff. And like this, to me, it just looked like a mess. I remember saying to him, nah, bro, this isn't the car, man. Keep searching. I know you really want a car, and he was like really eager and desperate to get one. I think had he recently passed his test? I'm not sure. I'm not sure what changed for him, but he was suddenly really eager to get a car, and he wanted this A-Class. And I was like, bro, don't get this car, man. It's gonna give you problems. It just doesn't look like it's been cared for. Service history was suspect. It was all just the thing. Just like everything about it just was like, nah, this isn't it. So, despite my protests and my advice, sometimes this happens, he was still adamant that he wanted the car. He said, no, I need this car, bro. I need the car. I'm like, okay, well, look, I don't think you should get the car, but if you want to get the car, I'm not going to stop you. But if you are going to get this car, let me get you a good price. And so, sat down with the owners and said, well, okay, had a look around the car, saw the price that was advertised for. However, I don't think that there's a few things that, because as I was walking around the car, I was asking them about these different things that they hadn't mentioned in the advert. So the radio work isn't working. Do you know what that is? I think there was something with the tail light, maybe there's some water in there or something like that. Do you know what this is? Do you know why this piece is missing? Do you know what's happened here? Okay, there's this tape in the engine, this electrical tape that's wrapped around parts of the like airbox and the air pipe sort of ducting and stuff. Do you know why that is? No, kind of like, I don't know. And I was like, yeah, really, you really don't know any of all these things that there's issues with these cars. You really don't know what any of them are. I was like, I find that a bit hard to believe, but okay. So I said, well, looking at the condition, I think at the time it was like, let's say, for example, the price was maybe £1,000, or was it maybe £700? And I was like, okay, well, so I listed the car for that much. I'll be quite honest with you. I've had a look at the car, I've pointed out some of these things that you didn't mention before. You're not sure what they are, but they're issues that are probably going to need to be addressed or might be an issue in the future. I don't think that the price is accurate representation of what the car's worth. I don't say that to be disrespectful, but I think we can both agree based on what we've seen that there's some issues here that are probably going to need to be addressed. I personally don't necessarily think that this is the car that you should get, but he does want to get it. So, and so what I'm trying to do is kind of lay out an offer. It sounds a bit long-winded, but I'm basically trying to set the scene. So look, you said you wanted, I don't know, £700 for the car. That's not happening. This car is not worth £700. And so then I think they threw out an offer. And so I kind of let that sit for a little bit. And I sort of said, don't think it's worth that. And so kind of wanted to let them stew a little bit, and just, think about what the offer was and what made sense. And I think I asked them, so what do you think, all these things considered, what do you think would be a reasonable price for the car? In my mind, whatever they're going to tell me, I was going to go £100 or two, offer them £100 or two lower than that. And I don't say this to be a bad person, but I really think that the car was a lot rougher than they made it seem in the advert. And I don't think you should have got the car, but I thought if you're going to buy it and you're adamant upon buying it anyway, then let's get a good deal. So sitting there, and there's a bit of tension in the room. And then I think he just like blurted out like, oh, would you take £500? And they're like, yes. And I was like, I remember looking at him like, bro, you brought me here to negotiate for you, to help you buy this thing. And then just, I was so annoyed, because in my mind, I think the car was worth maybe £300 or £400, if that. I wouldn't have bought the car myself, but if you really want it, okay, cool. And then he was like, then I remember he said £500. She said, yes, I'll accept it straight away. And I was just like, yeah, obviously you should have said that, because she knows that the car's got issues. So I think it was like her and her son. And then they're like, are you a mechanic? And I was like, no, I'm not a mechanic, but I know a little bit about cars. I'm interested in cars. So then we agree, sale kind of gets done, go through the particulars and sign over the papers and that sort of stuff. Then with his savings, we immediately go to Halfords to get a new head unit for this car. Now, like I said to him, the head unit in it wasn't working, so he wants to get a head unit to play some music, because tunes, you're driving, you want to hear some tunes. And get to Halfords, and back in the day, or many years ago this was, at Halfords on Oak Kent Road at least, there was a guy, I think he was a Jamaican dude, that used to fit stereos. And so I think this is before Halfords kind of started doing things like that themselves, where you can get them to fit bulbs and things. There'll be people outside, sometimes outside like Wicks and places like that, you get people that offer you their services when it comes to like home repairs and laying flooring or painting and things like that. But anyway, in this case, this guy did stereos, and so he took out the stereo for the Mercedes. It was like a factory unit that didn't work, And when I tell you behind it was Spaghetti Junction, it was crazy. There was just I've never seen anything like it. It was just loads of wires, loads of cut wires. It was like somebody had pulled out the head unit, just hacked the loom behind it, and then kind of pushed it back in. It was wild. It was, and then this guy was credit to him because he was I suppose you could call him a bit of a street electrician in a way, because he kind of repaired a lot of stuff. He twisted wires together, taped them up, which isn't really the way you're supposed to kind of fix wires, but I think it looked quite secure what he had done, with all the electrical tape that he used. And so he kind of understood what wire was what, and he kind of taped the loom back together and then put an issue head unit, and it worked. And I was really impressed by that. So, more power to him. But yeah, I was really annoyed about that, about him going for that car. So lo and behold, I think I changed jobs, and we're still staying in touch because he's a friend of mine. I haven't spoken to him for a little while, but he's still a friend of mine. So if I see him, it's nothing but love. But the car broke down within the 6 months of him buying it, and then he had to scrap it in the end because it had some major kind of engine faults. And I was like, bro, I told you, man. Yeah. Hate to say I told you so, but no, I didn't even. It wasn't even like it felt good saying I told you so. I was like, bro, this is not going to end well, and it didn't end well, and I wasn't surprised. I remember him saying at the time, and we spoke about it that day. I was like, well, why were you so eager to buy? He said, I don't know, man. I just want to drive. And I said, why did you shout at that price? And he goes, it was the pressure. I couldn't take the pressure of the situation. And I was like, okay, bro, yeah, on your head be it. I mean, he's got new car since then, and a much nicer car, so all's well that ends well to an extent. But yeah, if you do take a car person with you to negotiate for a car or to help you buy a car, then take their advice. There was another time as well, actually, funny enough, same workplace, different person that I helped to buy a car as a Polo. That was a bit of a different story. I think I just didn't like the Polo because I felt like it was a little bit rough in places. But I think there was a guy that was selling them he called himself Mr. Polo, and he sold Polos. Something interesting that he had done, he had kind of, I think, bought this car and tracked down its service history, and so he had a photocopied service history book, which looked a bit ropey to me, and so that kind of put me off because the car had some of the trim just was a bit loose. So looking at the car as well, again, overall it wasn't bad, but it was a bit rough in places. Maybe he had kind of tried to fix it up himself or something. I don't know, but they bought that car and they were happy with it, and they gave me a little finder's fee for that. So hey, if you want someone to help you find a car or buy a car, then I wouldn't mind being paid to help people find cars again. But yeah, that was interesting. Anyway, back to the list. That was a heck of a tangent, but we move. Going to car shows. And so this is kind of interesting because I would consider myself to be an enthusiast, but I have not been to that many car shows. Not as many I think I should have been to. So I used to go to Ace Cafe quite a fair bit. So if you are, I noticed that some of the people that watch this podcast or listen to this podcast are actually from the US, which is pretty cool. So if you're in the UK, there's a place called Ace Cafe, which is on, is it on the A4 or 6? It's quite a well-known place. If you were to Google it, you'll find it. But it's quite a well-known sort of motorbike cafe. But they also have car nights, and they have a VAG night, which is Volkswagen Audi group. They have BMW nights. They have also different cars, classic cars. It's a really good place to go if you're into cars. Have a look at their website. They've got a lot of they've got a really good calendar of different events that happen on a weekly basis or daily basis even. And so that was kind of one of the main places I went to. It's somewhere to be maybe a little bit careful at times because people can drive a little bit recklessly up and down that strip, and so I think they've put I can't remember the term for it, but it's imagine really strong grip tape, like the kind of tape you put on a skateboard, but obviously industrial scale one for car tires, and so they kind of put that along the road to try and stop people from drifting in, doing burnouts and donuts and stuff like that, and that's had varying degrees of success, but people still do it anyway. But I've also been to, as you'll probably hear depending on which order this gets released in, but a friend of mine that I'm going to talk to at some point on the pod about a car trip I went to. I actually went to Geneva. That was really cool. I think that was just before sort of maybe the year before the pandemic. So, because I think I wanted to go back the next year, but then I couldn't. But yeah, that was really cool. That was a massive car show, and that was really awesome to kind of go there. And it's funny how you go to a car show and it kind of desensitizes you in some ways to what a nice car is. And so cars that in their own right you'd see as being like amazing kind of become like, oh yeah, it's just like a Golf GTI. Okay, it's a really good, it's a really nice car. Or a Golf, oh, it's a nice car. When you see them at a car show, you just see them amongst like Mansouri and like Ferraris and all these different types of vehicles that are there. I find that really interesting. Yeah, car shows are fascinating because you kind of have like the established stands, but then you have like sort of I suppose third party, either manufacturers, not manufacturers, but third party companies that are like selling things for cars. I remember one company had like a car cover and they had like a Lamborghini there as like a demo, and basically it's like this automated car cover that kind of there's a box at the back of the car. The cover goes over the car, and then kind of press a button, and it kind of mechanically removes like the cloth from the car, and then it kind of sucks it into this box at the back. And I thought that's pretty cool. But yeah, it's interesting being at like a car show like that and seeing like the different sort of tiers of people where people have really big stands that have obviously spent a lot of money on it, and then you've got people with like the really sort of smaller kind of almost like concessionary type stands. But yeah, it was a really good experience. I do recommend that if you are able to go, then going to Geneva was a great experience. And maybe we'll go again. We'll see. Also, I haven't been to that many modified car shows, incidentally. It's a weird thing. I think this year I'm gonna make an effort maybe to go to a few more this summer. Spent a lot of time looking at cars, but haven't been to that many car shows. So on that list of items, going to car shows, maybe I fall down slightly on the enthusiast bit there, but I think overall I still kind of meet the majority of the criteria. That's it. Before I get out of here today, that said, one more thing I want to talk about is, so I haven't seen it yet. If you're watching, depending on when you listen to this, at the moment there's a new Fast and the Furious film. Yes, I know, it's called Fast and Furious X, and I mean, it's really interesting. I think that film franchise, the way that they've kind of decided to name it, and this isn't original. This isn't my observation, but someone posted this on social media somewhere, and I think it's a really good point that all the names for the films make no sense. And so let's just quickly go through the list of names for the Fast and Furious films. So the first film obviously was called The Fast and the Furious, right? First film was called The Fast and the Furious. Okay. Second film, is it called The Fast and the Furious 2? No, it's called Too Fast, Too Furious. Okay, fair enough. Technically there's like a prelude, but we don't really include that because it's not really a full film. But after that you had Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift. Now you could argue because it's, I suppose, Tokyo Drift, maybe it's an offshoot of the same franchise, so we'll kind of give that one a pass. But then what comes after? So that's the third film in the series, and so far we have no kind of pattern forming. After that, you've got the fourth film, which is Fast and Furious. Not Fast and Furious 4, not Fast 4. It's Fast and Furious. Okay. So then we move down the list, and then we get on to Fast 5. It's like I really do wonder how they kind of, how does this naming convention work? There's no kind of order here. So okay, Fast 5, cool. Then after Fast 5, you have not Fast 6, but you have Fast and Furious 6. And it's like, well, what order does that follow? So there's a Fast. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, well, yeah. So we've got The Fast and the Furious, the original film, great. Too Fast, Too Furious, okay. Fast and Furious, Fast 5, then Fast and Furious 6. I suppose in terms of the order, no, Tokyo Drift is supposed to have come after Fast and Furious 6 in terms of the actual order sequence of events, but that's like retrospective. Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift is kind of an anomaly unto itself. Yeah. And then so what comes after the sixth film? Is it Fast and Furious 7? Fast 7? No, Furious 7. It's like, how does that make sense? So Furious 7. Okay, cool. Then what comes after Furious 7, you have The Fate of the Furious. And so you think maybe it'll be like Fate with an 8, but no, it's just The Fate, as in Fate the word, that's it. The Fate of the Furious. Then you have Fast and the Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. That's kind of like an offshoot. Cool. I'll let that kind of slide as being its own thing. So then you come on to the 9th film in the franchise. And so we've got 9 films deep now, and the names just make no sense. They're all over the place. Yeah. So F9, the Fast Saga. So there's not even Furious isn't in the title anymore. It's I don't know what's going on at this point. F9, the Saga. That's the 9th film. And then what's the 10th film called? Fast X. Now, as much as it doesn't make any sense. It actually doesn't make any sense. So the 10th film is Fast X. No Furious in there, just Fast X. And apparently there's still 2 more films to be made. There was supposed to be 1 more, but apparently they stretched it out to 2 because Fast and Furious is just like printing money, isn't it really? As much as I've said all these things, I'm still going to go and see it. And so that'll probably be something that we speak about in the next pod. But I think it's still, as much as I criticize the franchise, and I think the last ones have gotten a little bit out of control, it still is one of my favorite film franchises. I do like the cars and the stuff that happens in it. The last one's got a bit wild with some of the stuff, like the magnet thing with the ridiculous magnet that it's hard to kind of ignore the way that the physics don't really make sense to me, that a magnet has the strength to pull a car through a building but doesn't really attract metal from any of the buildings around it. It's like, it doesn't really make sense. And how is the van strong enough to not be pulled towards the building which doesn't move if the magnets are, it didn't really make sense. But yeah, I do appreciate the cars that are in there. Whoever does the car casting, keep it up, good work. But yeah, I'll be watching that. I think that said, Fast and the Furious, I watch it for what it is. I don't expect it to have a great story, to be an amazing film in terms of I'm not watching it because it's got a story like Inception, for example. It's not that type of film. It's an action film. It's a blockbuster film. It's a feel-good summer kind of flick. And for what it is, I think I still do appreciate it. I really do enjoy that it kind of celebrates cars and car culture, and there's a mix of cars in there, and they do go through an effort to kind of show different cars at different times and different parts of the automotive scene. And so, have a lot of respect for them for doing that. But I think one of my favourite car films is probably Gone in 60 Seconds. I think that's probably, like, Nicolas Cage is arguably my favourite car film. I think maybe I'll do this in another podcast episode. I'll kind of do like a longer series about my favourite films. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Fast X and telling you all about it. So maybe in the next episode, when I've watched the film, I'll do a bit about what my favourite car films are. That brings me to the end of my time today. And I look forward to hearing from you all. And yeah, please do comment, like, and subscribe. Peace.